In the midst of our company's annual corporate gala, right in the center of the luxurious ballroom, my husband suddenly snapped and shouted in front of hundreds of people, "Does anyone want to take my wife off my hands? Yves had enough. This woman is just dead weight." At that exact moment, a deathly silence fell over the ballroom. I fought with all my might to hold back the tears that were ready to burst from my eyes, standing there with my head bowed low in unbearable shame. But then Mr. Ethan Grant, our CEO, known for his nerves of steel and ruthlessness in business, slowly rose from his seat in the VIP section and replied for everyone to hear, "I accept your offer. With great pleasure." From that very second, my husband's life turned into a series of regrets that would haunt him for the rest of his days. But that night, in the banquet hall of the five-star Ritz-Carlton in New York, I, Sarah, felt nothing but an unbearable cold. Despite the hundreds of people bustling around in tuxedos and evening gowns, the dazzling golden light of the crystal chandeliers reflected only on the mirrored marble floor, failing to warm me at all. Laughter and the clinking of glasses filled the air, creating a symphony of glamour, but to me, it was all foreign. I sat in the farthest corner of the hall, nervously fingering the hem of my simple navy blue mass-market dress. My hair, styled with careful modesty, emphasized my quiet nature, but the glances of those around me were full of cynical judgment, as if they were dissecting me under a microscope. I knew my outfit couldn't compare to the glaringly expensive, sequin dresses worn by the wives of my husband's colleagues, but I tried to keep it together for him, for Tyler. Tyler seemed like a completely different person that evening. The man who usually whined about being tired the moment he stepped through our door after work had vanished without a trace. In his place stood a peacock, squeezed into a new Tom Ford suit bought on credit installments just a week ago. His face was flushed, not so much from the expensive Cabernet, but from the intoxication of others' flattery and his own immense arrogance. He laughed loudly at his colleagues' flat jokes, constantly reaching for his glass. Amber, a colleague from the marketing department, hovered near him in a provocatively tight dress and heavy makeup that would be called too much in the States. Amber was practically glued to Tyler, whispering something in his ear. And with every word she said, he seemed to swell with pride, imagining himself the king of this party. I saw Amber cast occasional contemptuous glances my way, before leaning back into Tyler with a forced giggle. The atmosphere grew even louder when the host took the stage, inviting anyone who wished to say a few words or give a short speech. Tyler, fancying himself the star of the branch, immediately shot his hand up and, swaying with excitement, headed for the stage. Amber playfully patted him on the back, a fake gesture of support that was actually pushing him toward the abyss. Tyler literally snatched the microphone from the host's hands. The sharp screech of the audio system pierced the hall, silencing everyone and drawing all eyes to the stage. My husband was grinning ear to ear. His eyes wandered through the room until they landed on me, sitting alone in my dark corner. Tyler began his speech, his voice amplified by the speakers echoing throughout the venue. He bragged about the incredible achievements of his team this quarter, praising himself to high heaven. People clapped out of politeness. Some looked frankly bored, but Tyler wasn't about to stop. He felt he needed something more provocative, something that would make everyone remember him as a witty and daring guy. And then he pointed his finger directly at me. All eyes followed his gesture. I felt practically bolted to my chair. My heart was pounding in my throat. A sense of dread washed over me like an icy wave. Tyler, adopting a deliberately mocking tone, shouted in front of hundreds of colleagues and top managers that his wife was an unbearable bore at home. He complained that I was too modest, that I didn't know how to light up a party, and that the only thing I was good for was the kitchen and housework. A group of his dim-witted friends from the sales department snickered mockingly. Believing he had hit the jackpot, Tyler grew even bolder. He claimed his life was damn hard because he had to support a wife who didn't earn a cent and did nothing but ask for money for the monthly bills. The reality was that I, Sarah, was the one who managed to stretch Tyler's meager salary so that we had enough to last the month. And I often used my own personal savings to cover his craving for a luxury lifestyle he couldn't afford. The climax of the humiliation came a second later. Tyler spread his arms wide, like a barker at a Brooklyn flea market. "Does anyone want to take my wife off my hands?" he bellowed. I'm fed up with this piece of luggage without a handle. He added that I was a burden and completely failed to match his current status as a successful man. And to top it off, he threw in a mocking comment. If anyone was interested, they could take me right now. The noisy hall instantly plunged into dead silence. Even his buddies stopped laughing. The joke had crossed all boundaries of common sense. This wasn't humor anymore. It was a public trampling of a woman's dignity. I lowered my head. Hot tears stung my eyes. But I fought desperately not to let them fall. I didn't want to look weak in front of people who already despised me. I bit my lip until it hurt. Unbearable shame squeezed my chest, making it hard to breathe. I wanted to sink through the floor, but my legs felt like lead. On stage, Tyler continued to smile foolishly, waiting for applause that never came. He was too limited to realize that the atmosphere had turned icy. Suddenly, the sound of a chair being sharply pushed back broke the silence. A man stood up from the VIP table in the front row. It was Mr. Ethan Grant, the owner of Grant Global, the corporation where Tyler worked. Tall, with an athletic build, wearing a black shirt with sleeves rolled up to the elbows, he radiated an overwhelming charisma. Mr. Grant's face was impassive, but his gaze was so sharp it seemed to pierce right through Tyler. Ethan slowly made his way to the stage. The sound of his footsteps echoed clearly in the silence. No one dared make a sound. Tyler's confidence began to evaporate before our eyes. His smirk slipped away, replaced by an expression of total confusion. Mr. Grant stepped onto the podium and, with a calm but commanding motion, took the microphone from Tyler's hands. He didn't even look at my husband, his gaze was fixed on me. Mr. Grant's voice, deep and authoritative, rang out over the hall. He asked if Tyler confirmed that he was truly offering his wife to anyone who wanted her. Tyler, mistakenly thinking the boss had decided to play along with his joke, gave a nervous chuckle and nodded quickly, confirming his idiotic proposal. Ethan Grant's next response made everyone present catch their breath. In a clear and decisive voice he said, "Deal. I'm taking her." In the blink of an eye, Tyler's face went white as a sheet. He tried to find any sign that Mr. Grant was joking, but there wasn't a shadow of a smile on the CEO's face. Ethan stepped down from the stage and walked straight to me, his broad back shielding me from the cynical stares of the crowd. In a much softer tone he spoke to me, but his voice was loud enough for Tyler, still standing on stage with his mouth agape, to hear everything. Mr. Grant said he would pick me up tomorrow morning at exactly 9 o'clock. He told me to be ready. Saying this, he cast a glance at Tyler, full of icy warning and restrained fury. He made it clear that in front of hundreds of witnesses, a verbal contract had been made. Then Ethan nodded to his assistant to escort me out of that suffocating atmosphere. I stood up, my whole body trembling. I didn't dare look at Tyler. Silently nodding to Mr. Grant in gratitude for saving me from that hell, I walked out of the hall, leaving behind a husband who had now become the center of attention. Not because of his success, but because of the monumental stupidity he had just committed. The next morning, the silence in our Brooklyn apartment was suffocating. Tyler hadn't slept. He paced the living room, his Tom Ford suit from the night before crumpled on the floor like a discarded skin. He kept muttering that it was just a joke, that Grant has a weird sense of humor, and that I shouldn't take it seriously. But his hands were shaking as he checked his work email every 30 seconds. At exactly 9 a.m., a sleek black Cadillac Escalade pulled up to the curb of our brownstone. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Im downstairs. E.g. Tyler looked out the window and turned pale. He's actually here? Sarah, you're not going. Tell him it was a misunderstanding. I looked at Tyler, really looked at him, for the first time in years. I saw a man who had traded my dignity for a few cheap laughs from his co-workers. You sold me, Tyler, I said, my voice cold and steady. And in this country a deal is a deal. I grabbed my suitcase, which I had packed in the middle of the night, and walked out. When I reached the car, the driver opened the door. Ethan Grant was in the back seat, laptop open, looking every bit the billionaire CEO. He didn't look up immediately. Sit, he commanded. As we drove toward Manhattan, the tension was thick. Where are we going? I asked, looking at the skyscrapers of the financial district. To my lawyer first, Ethan said, finally closing his laptop. His eyes were intense. Then to a boutique on Fifth Avenue. If you're going to be with me, you need to look the part. Tyler was right about one thing. You were hiding yourself. But he was wrong about why. The rest of the day was a whirlwind. At the law firm of Sterling and Associates, I signed papers I barely understood. But Ethan's legal team assured me they were filing for an expedited divorce from Tyler on the grounds of public humiliation and emotional distress. Ethan was moving fast, using his influence to bypass the usual months of waiting. Why are you doing this? I asked as we stood in a high-end dressing room later that afternoon. I was wearing a silk dress that cost more than Tyler's annual bonus. Ethan stepped closer, his reflection looming behind mine in the mirror. Because I hate waste, Sarah. Waste of talent, waste of loyalty, and waste of a woman like you on a man who thinks a wife swap joke is a career move. Tyler didn't just insult you, he insulted the values of my company. Over the next few weeks, the transformation began. Ethan didn't treat me like a trophy. He treated me like a project, or rather, a partner he was training. He discovered I had a degree in economics from NYU that ID never used because Tyler wanted me to stay home and manage his image. Ethan put me to work. I started as a consultant for one of his subsidiaries. I worked 14-hour days, learning the ropes of the New York tech scene. Meanwhile, Tyler's world was crumbling. Without my boring management of the bills, he missed 2 mortgage payments. His credit score, which I had carefully built up for him, plummeted. But the worst blow came from the office. Tyler arrived at the Grant Global headquarters on Monday morning, only to find his keycard deactivated. Security escorted him to the HR office on the 42nd floor. Mr. Miller, the HR director said, sliding a manila envelope across the desk. Your employment is being terminated effective immediately. On what grounds? Tyler stammered. I had the highest sales in my sector last month. Violation of the corporate code of conduct regarding harassment and creating a hostile work environment, she replied coldly. Specifically, the public disparagement of a spouse at a company-sanctioned event. It's a PR nightmare. Here is your final check, minus the deductions for the company car you damaged. Tyler left the building with his belongings in a cardboard box, standing on the sidewalk of Park Avenue as the rain began to fall. He tried to call me, but I had changed my number weeks ago. He went to the bar where he usually hung out with his friends. When he walked in, the laughter stopped. Hey, look, it's the guy who gave his wife to the boss. One of them shouted. How's the promotion going, Tyler? Even Amber, the girl who had been flirting with him at the gala, wouldn't look at him. She was busy chatting up the new regional manager. In the cutthroat world of New York corporate life, Tyler had become a punchline. He wasn't the alpha he thought he was just a cautionary tale. 3 years later, I stepped out of a black town car in front of the Grand Global Plaza in Midtown Manhattan. The morning air was crisp, and the city hummed with that specific energy only New York has. I was no longer the quiet woman in the navy blue off-the-rack dress. Today, I wore a tailored charcoal suit from a boutique on Madison Avenue, my hair styled in a sharp, professional bob. As I walked through the lobby, the security guards nodded respectfully. Good morning, Emmett Miller, they said. I smiled back. Since the divorce, I had kept my last name, not out of respect for Tyler, but as a reminder of the woman who had survived him. I was now the senior vice president of operations, the second in command to Ethan Grant. My relationship with Ethan had evolved. What started as a deal to save my dignity had turned into a formidable partnership. He saw the potential that Tyler had tried to bury under domestic chores and insecurity. Ethan didn't just give me a job. He gave me the resources to reclaim my life. I was heading to a meeting regarding the acquisition of a failing logistics firm when I saw a figure sitting on a park bench across the street. He looked out of place among the bustling commuters and tourists. He was wearing a tattered coat that might have been expensive once, but was now stained and frayed. His beard was overgrown, and he was clutching a paper cup from a nearby Starbucks, hoping for a refill or a few cents. It was Tyler. After he was fired and blacklisted from every major firm in the city, he had spiraled. He tried to sue Ethan for theft of a spouse, But the high-powered lawyers at Sterling and Associates laughed him out of court. They pointed out that he had made a public offer in front of 500 witnesses, including the city's top executives. In the eyes of the law, it was a nuisance suit. In the eyes of society, it was pathetic. He had lost the apartment. He had lost his friends. He had even lost Amber, who had moved on to a hedge fund manager the moment Tyler's bank account hit zero. I paused for a second, my hand on the heavy glass door of the office building. Tyler looked up and our eyes met. For a brief moment, I saw a flash of recognition in his sunken eyes. He stood up, dropping his cup, and took a step toward me. "Sarah?" he croaked. "Sarah, please. I made a mistake. I was drunk. I didn't mean it. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel a need for revenge. I felt nothing." He was a stranger from a different life. "Everything has a price, Tyler," I said quietly, though I knew he couldn't hear me through the thick glass. "You set mine at nothing. Ethan set it at everything." I turned my back on him and walked into the building. My assistant met me at the elevator with a tablet. "The board is waiting, Sarah. And Mr. Grant wanted to remind you about the gala tonight," he said this time. "You're the one giving the speech." I nodded, feeling the weight of the key to my own office in my pocket. I had gone from being a burden to a woman who helped run one of the most powerful companies in the United States. That evening, the ballroom at the St. Regis was even more grand than the one 3 years ago. But the atmosphere was different. When Ethan and I entered, the room didn't fall silent out of shock, it buzzed with admiration. I stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd. I saw ambitious young professionals, seasoned executives, and their spouses. I cleared my throat, the microphone capturing every confident breath. "In business, we talk about assets and liabilities," I began, my voice steady. "We talk about what adds value and what drains it. But sometimes, the greatest mistake a person can make is misidentifying one for the other. A partner is not an asset you own or a liability you discard. A partner is the foundation." Ethan watched me from the front table, a rare, genuine smile on his face. He wasn't my owner, he was my equal. After the speech, as we stood on the balcony overlooking the lights of Times Square, Ethan handed me a glass of sparkling water. "You've come a long way from that corner in the Ritz-Carlton," he said. "We both have," I replied. Meanwhile, blocks away, Tyler was being moved along by a police officer for loitering too close to a luxury hotel. He sat down on a subway grate to keep warm, clutching a discarded newspaper. On the business page, there was a small photo of me and Ethan, announcing our latest merger. He stared at the photo until the ink stained his fingers. He had wanted to be a big man in New York. He wanted to be the guy everyone noticed. He got his wish. Everyone remembered Tyler Miller, the man who threw away a diamond because he thought it was a pebble. I looked up at the stars over Manhattan. They were bright, cold, and beautiful, just like my new life. Thank you for listening to my story all the way through. If it resonated with you, give it a like, comment on what touched you the most, and be sure to mention where you're from. Subscribe to the channel. There are plenty more stories to come.